I just want to get rid of myself, but I can live with that.
I'm the opposite. I love me some me. I can't even
Josh
function.
only wants to see himself. They spent as much time training those models as they did their FTEs, their actual headcount.
Talking about how folks are doing things more with less, right? Isn't that the theme that we hear from in the VC boardrooms these days? You need to do more with less.
Frankly, a lot of organizations have a lot of wood to chop still on how do you really dial in the team? And then, if you want to apply technology.
In the last month, we've also basically banned them from using Slack.
Welcome to another episode of the Cheat Code and Friends podcast, joined today by Justin Gray and Sean Kester. What's up, gentlemen?
What's going on?
Same old shit, man. Just ready for another pod.
Oh, right. Wow. He's ready to rock. All right, here we go. Well, we're on a little bit of a CRO revenue leader series here, talking about how folks are doing things more with less, right? Isn't that the theme that we hear from in the VC boardrooms these days? You need to do more with less. So today we're joined by this is my favorite stuff, right? So this is someone I sold to 10 years ago, we'll say, right? So I love that when people that I sold to like me enough to come and talk to me later.
I was going to say, and Kyle's still speaking with you. That's
exactly right. That's my favorite stuff. So Kyle Norton is the chief revenue officer at owner.com. We connected, we'll call it 10 years ago, when you were running some function at Shopify, and I sold you some services. So that's awesome. But here we are. We're going to talk about the role of AI, doing more with less, and a whole bunch of stuff like that. Kyle, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
All right. Well, here we go. I was thinking about this when I wanted to have you on the pod, but probably 2 years ago. We had just started in Revenue Capital, and we're up in Toronto visiting a Portco. So we reconnected, and we're sitting down for coffee. And, this is 2 years ago now. You were already talking about the role AI was playing for you at owner.com and some of the things that you were doing to make your targeting better. And that's what I thought was super interesting, because you had a segment of the market that was not readily available to find by traditional data sources. So that's where I want to start, because, we invest in vertical SaaS, and oftentimes that's the case.
Yeah. Especially in vertical SaaS, data is such an advantage. I think, like, both from a product and a go-to-market perspective, a lot of people have a strong belief that vertical AI is going to be a compounding area of interest, because as the data gets better from a niche of the market, your product can get better. You can learn about how to serve them, target them, all that good stuff. And so it was almost 3 years ago at this point, we started to dive into the data side, not because I had some big vertical SaaS opinion at the time, but just like from running BDR teams in the past, knew the advantage of having highly curated lists that didn't have a lot of no longer with companies in it, and good contact information. And so my now VP of Biz Ops and Data and I sat down, and we were just like, I sort of like laid out my plan for building Outbound and how important data was. And he sort of just went to work, and he built custom scrapers and enrichment flows that would visit, public websites and basically everything on the internet from the restaurants we wanted to target, scrape it into our instance of Snowflake. And then he ran a few different enrichment flows, and then it went into these two like ML models. And so one ML model was called EWIN, estimated win rate. So it's like, how good of a fit is this? How much does it look like our current really successful customers? And that is tuned both for like our win rate on close, but also how likely they are to be successful. And that piece of the model was what we call eGBV. So it's an estimated gross payments volume metric, which tells us, okay, we can win these customers, and these customers have a high eGBV, so they're likely to be very successful with us. And that still to this day powers 3 years later, almost all of our targeting. And now we use data lane to get contact information and better enriched info from the web. They're sort of a vertical SaaS data specialist. It's like Zoom Info for SMB. And we even just made like a big update to eGPV last week to further refine concepts that like look good based on the scoring, but we actually found they churned at a higher rate than we like. So we ran like another big AI run to figure out, okay, like let's remove the poor concept fits that have high web traffic, that are well rated and reviewed, but something about their concept doesn't match for us. So like it's a cafe or a bakery. So lots of volume, but maybe the basket size doesn't make as much sense for what owner provides. And so we've like pulled all that out of the eGPV model. So it's still like a cornerstone for us.
Oh, that's really interesting. I think we've evaluated maybe half a dozen restaurant techs since our doors were open. And that's one of the biggest challenges we always run up against. It's like, if you're not targeting the mid-market and the enterprise, how the hell are you targeting? Right. Like,
Well,
it's just,
but even as Kyle was talking, I was just thinking like you can almost draw a straight line down the two cohorts of businesses that have thought really intentionally about who they serve really well, what the nuances of those businesses are, and done this kind of amalgamation of on one end hacking things together, on the other side getting really scientific around classifying and categorizing those signals, and then on the other side, folks that are just like, oh, I can't find this data in Zoom Info or Apollo, and kind of throw up their hands in confusion. And the same segmentation is true for success and non-successful organizations. And so it's just, again, knowing your customer, I think, is at the root of this. And then being creative enough to know that grabbing data off of the shelf from the same provider that millions of other companies are using at the same time is probably not going to be the best approach. So this seems kind of such a no-brainer, but it's at the same time so rare.
And you have to combine art and science. Like you can't just tell a model, "Hey, tell me what my ICP is." You have to bring nuance to it, and you have to have a very like in-depth and intimate understanding of like the types of customers that you feel like you can win and serve really well, and try to get hyper targeted with it. And all the AI tools can help tremendously to do that refinement, and then eventually do the scraping, enrichment, scoring, and targeting. But it all starts with like a really clear understanding of ICP.
Yeah, we used to do the same thing with hiring, because we had so many revs against what works, and this was a consulting environment, right? So like what works not only as a great consultant, but on a team that looks like this composition, what are we missing there, right? And so I can't say that we ever fully crack the code. I don't think anyone fully cracks the code on any of this stuff, but like the critical thought going into that, I think is directionally what you want to see in great go-to-market teams and great talent.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm interested in how you mentioned at the top that this was to build an outbound engine. And I think every founder at the core of them thinks that it has this vision of this outbound warrior that, goes and is dialing for dollars for 100 hours a week. But what did that mean to you, right? Like what did that outbound engine look like? And what was the result of taking this, very, scientific approach?
Yeah. So it's funny, like we were 90% inbound when I started. We swung to almost 60% outbound at one point, and now we're back to 70% inbound again. We hired some really great growth leaders. Our new CMO is like really taken us to even like the next level. So all of these scoring mechanisms apply inbound as well. So like when somebody hits our web form, the first thing we do is ask for their restaurant information, and then we're going and running these flows to do the like enrichment score to know what journey we should push them to. Should they see a live booking form that gives them access to a rep's calendar? Should we push them into our self-serve journeys? So it's not just outbound, but on the outbound side, we went from having, like our ACV is 10K. And it's really hard to make those ACVs work in outbound unless you're doing really high volumes. But our BDRs went from like basically wasting 60% of their time dialing into accounts that were wrong or wrong person, no phone number, to now, like 95% of those leads are accurate. Almost all of them have mobile phone numbers. And our average BDR produces like 70K ARR closed won every single month. So the BDR cost to revenue acquired, the last time we did these numbers was like 0. Or it was 8.9% or something like that. It's like over a 10x return on the BDR cost, because they're connecting with, if they make 100 dials, they connect with 13 to 16 decision makers. They're converting those at like a 15% rate. So they can put up pretty big numbers. And if we can get meetings, we can close at a very high rate. Yeah. It gives us a platform to, like, whenever we see a time where we're like, oh, like marketing's not scaling as much, or we want more channel diversity. Like, we're in the process of hiring 25 BDRs in a 75-day time period, because we're really trying to diversify lead channels, and we want to like grow even more aggressively next year. And that's only possible because it's so efficient.
So obviously you have to have data that's accurate. To your point earlier, if you're calling into lists that are just terrible from a contact accuracy perspective, you're not going to be able to do anything. But what do you attribute that team's success? I mean, those sales efficiency numbers are off the charts. What are they actually doing that you would attribute that performance to?
Let me give a meta answer first. I think it's attention to detail. So like, we just sweat every single little tiny detail of this whole value chain, from the hiring profile. So it's like, we have a very specific hiring profile with a weighted scorecard, and the questions are outlined from every single step of the journey. They know what they're looking for. We do like a feedback mechanism to ensure that reps get feedback to be better, or managers get feedback on being better hiring managers. And we're like tweaking our scorecards and our process. And then the onboarding, like, my enablement team, I think, is 7 or 9 people today, and we're, only like a 350 person company. And so it's a big investment, but that onboarding program kicks people out. They've done 10 to 20 hours of sales simming. Like in Avara, they go through these sales simulators that we've like sweated for hours and hours, making sure that they're all like super accurate to real life and they're dialed into our frameworks. And so when the BDRs come out of this onboarding program that's planned down to the minute, they're hitting the phone sounding like they've done this job for multiple months. And it's like week 1.75. And like the diligence on the lead management side, and how we manage how the reps manage their day. So the first 3 hours of the day, the BDR managers are not allowed to have internal meetings. They do what we call a chop wood, carry water, which is like, you can do a handful of things. You can either sit next to a rep and like help do a ride along. You could prep lead lists. You can make calls yourself to like pre-squoze or open pipe for your reps. You can do one-on-one coaching, or you could do like call feedback, but it's something like action oriented, like live studio call feedback, not async, like listen to calls from yesterday, because we don't want them behind their desks. In the last month, we've also basically banned them from using Slack, other than like 60 minutes a day. Like at the beginning, before the day starts, get caught up on Slack, check in once in the middle, and then in the evening, like you can get all caught up and do your thing. But that, like, every one of those changes has incrementally like just turned the system up like a little bit at a time. And so, we're growing in volume, we're growing in efficiency. And so I think like your question is, how have we done it? It's really about attention to detail and like having data at every step of the way, and like looking at every single piece, and then one by one, thinking about ways to incrementally improve there. Like the one of the recent changes was getting everybody back to what we call our golden script, and like, how do we open? Because a bunch of teams had sort of like wandered away from the core way we wanted to teach it, with like this, pattern interrupt, establishing relevance or establishing credibility, then getting into relevance through a problem-based hypothesis of need. And so we noticed it was fraying. And so we did this, like all these master classes to bring everybody back to this golden script. And then like BDR conversion rates just crept up a couple percentage points, and all of those little things, in BDR land, it's shavings make a pile. Like it's the little things together.
Yeah, it's intentionality across the board. I think, to kind of loop back to the AI commentary that you guys started with, everyone that has successfully deployed, AI augmentation across their go-to-market team, most of the time on the outbound side, says that they spent as much time training those models as they did their FTEs, their actual headcount. And I think even that doesn't capture the nuance that you have to be really good at training people in a process like you're describing there to have that translate over into a successful, AI agent training as well. So I think, frankly, a lot of organizations have a lot of wood to chop still on how do you really dial in a team? And then, if you want to apply technology, bring in that same type of rigor, diligence, and intentionality that you're describing there.
Yeah. And I know you've got a lot of founders that listen. And so my advice to founders is like, the profile of a VP of sales or a CRO is significantly different today than it was before. Like, you can't just be a deal jockey and a people manager anymore. You could be an awesome CRO a few years ago and not be like an awesome systems thinker, but you could rip deals. You knew how to hire and bring up reps, and you knew how to run a really good forecast call. If you could do those three things, like, you were pretty good. And that is not at all the world we live in anymore. I just had Jason Lemkin on my podcast. We recorded earlier today, and something he said, in May, he's like, you can give your VP of sales till June to be in the tools constantly. And if not, he's like, they're cooked. He's like, they can't be your person into the future. And that was June of like 6 months ago. And so you have to be a systems thinker and a bit of a systems engineer to get by today, because if you're not, your competitor will, and that company is just going to have so much more leverage. Like, back in the early days of the sales acceleration game, if you were early to SalesLoft and the others, who I won't mention because Sean's on the call, if you were early, you had like a pretty significant advantage, maybe like 30, 40, 50% over people not using them. Now the difference, if you're like early to some of these tools, it's like 2-3x. Like, you can, I know my reps are like 3 to 4 times more productive than most of our competitors. And a lot of that is because of our application of AI. So the AI just gives you so much leverage that I think like the advantage that a systems engineering centric CRO has is so much greater to offset, even if they're not quite the deal person or the hiring manager or the forecast operator. Like that's what founders really need to sweat and look for, because it can't just be RevOps. Like, it can't be, like my data team's going to do it or my RevOps leader is going to figure it out. Like, if you don't have the intuition and the taste for it, it's going to be really tough to make the right calls in this world, because the nature of the beast is so different today.
Yeah, we're hearing that across the board as well. Like the interview process for a CRO or CMO today, like, it's largely about, how have you applied that curiosity? What are you doing with AI, even in your own, your own personal life, right? And so, yeah, it's no longer directing, the operations team behind the curtain. It's literally like, how are you getting your hands dirty?
Yeah, just to piggyback off that. So, Kyle, we've known each other for a while as well. You were also a customer of ours and on our customer advisory board at SalesLoft. So I think Josh might have sold to you first, but
what is this, a SalesLoft?
I do
no, you.
Yeah.
SalesLoft
Justin's the only one who did.
SalesLoft was like over a decade ago now.
That's right. But I remember you and I got in the weeds back in the day on how you were running things at the time. And I remember specifically you being pretty, you had a pretty tight ship over there. And it sounds like, just over time, you've gotten things more and more dialed. Well, when you talked about kind of AI use and you've talked about it at kind of a macro level for data integrity and whatnot, but what are you seeing like on your reps? Are you allowing them to do things kind of one off and experiment with different models or agentic or anything like that internally that's maybe not part of something that you would buy for the team? Are you seeing so many creative uses there? We had kind of one of our partner VCs go on a roadshow and ask a lot of sales leaders, like give examples of ways that was happening. We found that there'd be a lot of interesting things. So I'd love to hear kind of from you. Like, sounds like you're very AI forward and encouraging of that. Like, are you letting them kind of run a little wild and try some new things?
Yeah, they're using like ChatGPT for their own research and like drafting content and using it as like a little co-pilot. I would say we are more top down than most on this stuff because we just pay a lot of attention to it. When people say that a bunch of the best AI ideas are coming like from the bottoms up, it's like it's framed as like that's a good thing, but it sort of tells me that the leader is like way behind. Right. And if you have a smart team and you've got mid-market enterprise reps that have been around the block, a bunch of really smart, savvy individuals, yeah, you should certainly be bubbling up ideas from the team, but the leader, I think, has to be like as farther ahead than anybody. Like if my reps were posting stuff in our AI channel that I was like, oh, I've never done that, I would feel threatened and right. Self-conscious. And that's probably a me thing. But yeah, they're doing like pretty simple stuff on top of the tools that we offer. And we try to co-build with them, especially when designing what information in what formats are the most useful for you prepping for calls. But, like we've got this GTM AI lead and my VP of data and biz ops is like super cutting edge, VP of rev ops, me, like we are sort of way out there on the literacy spectrum, I would say. Those guys more so than me now, that I would say it's been more central than like democratized.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, that's a little bit scary, right? Like I'm sure anyone that's run sales teams has seen some of the ideas that come across from reps, even on simple things like CRM. And it's like, hey, I see what you're trying to do there, but God, no, we're not going to do that. So I think the ideas are certainly welcome, but I'd be a little bit scared if everyone was just kind of running willy-nilly and implementing their own thing.
One of the things that I find fascinating is that you're having a ton of success with an SDR motion, and we're finding a lot of founders just frankly struggling with that. Like it's just that is falling down. And obviously you outlined there's an intense plan behind that. It's not just, oh, we're going to hire SDRs, right? But you better than anyone would probably be positioned to leverage, AI SDR type of stuff. So that's where these people who are failing with human beings are going to AI. Like, what would your take be there? Like, why does your model work? What are they missing? What's AI options look like? Is it worthwhile?
Yeah. So it really depends on the market. Like we sell to restaurant owners and they're not big email guys. They pick up the phone though. You call their cell phone, they pick up. Like a lot of our customers struggle to get on a Google Meet. Like they're just such a different buyer than what many people are used to selling to. If you come from like white collar tech, and so we now do a bunch of AI BDR. So it was like it was like the ninth use case for us, and oftentimes it's like everybody's first. But one, I didn't think the models were good enough. I think like the early AI BDRs. It was like a cool demo, but really those emails were slop. Like those emails were pretty friggin' bad. And yeah, if you wanted to carpet bomb your market and get a quick sugar high because you've like found a bunch of low hanging demand or latent demand, there was value there. But I just like I was like, it's not good enough, and I didn't want to make it a thing. But we hired this GTM AI lead who was able to really build the workflow to take like big sets of data, distill it down to the most important things for that email content. We ran all of these like tests and ABs and got it to a place where we could feel really proud of those emails. And now we're sending out like 1,800 a day across this market, and then direct mail layers on top of it. And we're using the information from one for the other. So, it's happening now, but again, it's supplemental to these other motions, and it's still not more than like 10% of our lead gen. The other place that people will say AI SDR is like the inbound flow, and we have OneMind set up in our PLG motion. We're rolling it out to more places as it gets dialed. That I think is a really good one, because most people's like on-site experience and follow-up experience is like not that good. So you could have an agent that asks all the question, books the meeting. Like SaaS's agent is really good, that you can go like experience and play around with and basically buy from soup to nuts. But again, you have to like manage that. Somebody has to be dedicated to like every day for quite a long time, managing that experience, troubleshooting, going and reading the logs of the chat history and making those adjustments. And so like bang for buck, we just didn't prioritize it as that early compared to most. But now it's there, and it's going to be a meaningful part of our motion, especially down market. You know, like there's a part of the market that we can't economically serve with humans. So how do you replicate that human experience with a facsimile using an agent? And so that's like a early next year thing that we're figuring out.
I've got a question for you. When you go to buy anything that's got AI motion to it, any software that does, like, what are you tactically doing to test to see if it works? And I ask this because a lot of our founders are starting to go explore these for their sales organizations or otherwise. And like, I feel like they're not putting enough effort into figuring out how to run a proper test on it. And they're just trying to take it into necessarily like a new market that they've had no success with regular humans. And they're like, well, let's just see if AI can do it. And if it doesn't, then it's bad. And it's like, well, you never had success there anyway. So like, how are you or your teams kind of going out to evaluate?
That's a huge point, because Josh mentioned earlier, like teams looking to adopt, AI SDRs, and the majority that I've seen raise that as, hey, should we do this, have already failed with an internal SDR team. So like that right off the bat, it seems like a pretty bad A/B test.
Yes. Yeah. Like I think you have to know, I think you have to make it work with people first, before you can really figure it out with AI, unless you're going to have a dedicated like product manager type person that, or like a growth marketer type individual that is going to spend, the better part of a quarter in this experience, tweaking, testing, talking to people who went through that customer journey and treating it like these growth PMs have done. And yeah, I think you could probably figure out a market that you've never cracked with people, but like they sort of have to be that person. Like in our self-serve journey, when we were figuring it out, the product leader for that channel was like getting on the phone, talking to customers and like helping them through and problem solving. And so I think people will like, people are too myopic with these tools. They're like, oh, I don't know how to win this market. I don't want to do it with people. So I'm just going to like throw a model at it, or I'm going to throw an agent at it. And that's like never going to work. Like you need to treat it like you're launching a totally new market. And how would you put energy and resources around it normally? And you have to treat it with like that level of intention. A dedicated PM, somebody managing the agent every single day in there tweaking, and like probably data science resources aligned against it. And you're really going at it.
Yeah, it's like it's not a silver bullet, right? I mean, that's how a lot of people view it.
It's just like, everybody wants it to be a silver bullet.
Right.
Yeah. And the founders of these companies are marketing it like a silver bullet. We all have blame to share, but I think like, the other advice that I give is like, don't sign a contract without a pilot. These products in many cases are like not the hardest to set up. You need to see this thing work in your production environment before you can sign off. And, there's exceptions to that, like that you'll have to make, but, you got to push these companies to pilot with you, like prove out that it works. I like to bake off a couple tools at a time in that. Oftentimes it's like, the AI solution of an incumbent product we use. We're exploring a bunch of agent force stuff, or we use Guru's AI tool, even though I looked at 2 startups in the space. and you just like see what they look like, and you see what type of support you're going to get too. Like you need help. And so like now, the forward deployed engineer is like all the rage, but like, what's that actually look like? Like, what does it look like? And are you going to be set up for success in this thing?
Well, to that point, like you're not only, you're talking about launching a new market, you're launching a new product. I mean, every single organization that we invest in, if you were to strip out the data element, the actual, data that trains the model, you'd have a very horizontal, readily found LLM. But that what you're bringing to that is, the value is really in that data. And to your point, having done that previously in a human environment, or really understanding all the nuances around, what you're trying to build, that is what's going to create the outsized value in terms of training those models.
I'm curious if we like go macro a little bit and look into the future. I've done a little bit of research on a few of these things myself, and today they still integrate with things like HubSpot and Salesforce that are, cornerstones of a go-to-market tech stack. When does that change? Like, when does this become less of this legacy
Headless?
CRM tool? Yeah. And does AI play a role in that? And how does that, how do you foresee that happening?
So is the question, when are the incumbent CRMs displaced?
Yeah, when is that the default, right? Like the default is still Salesforce or HubSpot, right? For any startup to enterprise, right? Like they're all there.
Yeah. 18 months ago, I'd never really thought Salesforce was under any real competitive pressure, no disruptive threat. Then 18 months ago, I was like, this is when we're going to see it. This is when we're going to see some like legit AI native CRM take the market by storm and all this stuff. And then now, 18 months later, I actually sort of think this whole AI wave is going to be net good for Salesforce, because they have the boring stuff that's actually really important if you want to build a real company. They have the governance and the data model and the integration ecosystem. Like those things are non-trivial to build. And I think like Benioff has been smart that he's gone like all in pretty early on, like they are Agentforce. They're talking about renaming the company Agentforce, but I hear. And so I actually think they're going to be pretty well off in this era. Like even me, like I was sharing this story with Lemkin, a couple of years ago, I had a very contentious meeting with Salesforce when I was at Shopify. They were trying to sell us a bunch of Einstein stuff. I'm like, guys, like, don't do this. Like, treat me with more respect. Like, I'm not some buffoon that's going to be hoodwinked by this Einstein crap. Like, none of it works. Get lost. And I've like really changed my tune. And we're exploring doing a bunch with Agentforce, and we're exploring building tooling on top of Salesforce, and that's sort of a surprise to me. But as we've like done all the diligence and like, okay, like what are we going to build our own? What are we going to like vibe code in our own apps, or what are we going to build like into the Salesforce product or on top of the product? And sort of the winning solution specs look like they're the Salesforce versions. We are sort of in the camp that should really be doing the like build it yourself, going the build it yourself route. But we're going to see. I don't have a very confident answer on it, because it changes every like goddamn like 30 days. Like everybody was like, Google sucks. It's left behind. And like, I'm a Gemini guy now. I never would have thought I'd get peeled out of ChatGPT. Now I'm using Gemini more than any other model. It's like, you can't predict anything.
I saw Justin's face light up when you said that a good fundamental business has to be run on Salesforce. So he was all jazzed up.
I don't know why anyone buys any other CRM, quite honestly. We won't go down that rabbit hole.
Well, it's expensive, I think, is half the reason when you're a little tiny startup.
Yeah, but man, I wonder how much HubSpot is actually costing some businesses.
A lot.
Yeah.
Listen, I didn't think anyone would like purposely be on Teams either, but that changed when I came over here. So
we're democratized. You got everything.
I know. Yeah, I don't think there's a solution we don't have. Yeah. But I think your answer is a little bit of a narrative of where the AI market is, though, because I do think people are still solving point problems, right?
Mhm.
And layering them into an ecosystem, whereas Salesforce has the ecosystem, so they can think about it at a different stratosphere. Like, we're talking about an AI SDR doing outbound or helping with targeting, or you know what I mean? Like those are all points of the process. And I think that's how most companies that are AI startups, at least, are thinking about it. Well, there's this thing that I can solve for businesses because I've been in business and I know this is a problem. I can solve that thing, right? But then it starts to fall. That's why I asked the question, because you ask some of these days, well, how do you integrate into Salesforce? How do I, my reps workflow is here. How do I not take them out of that workflow? And, you get this blank stare. So, I think that's the challenges that you're going to start to come up with as you think, macro level, how does these AI, change the whole industry?
Yeah, and companies that are on the forefront are starting to have this conversation. Like we're certainly deep into this, is like, how do you manage all of the context and prompt engineering across all of these different models? So if we've got OneMind that's AI BDR, and we've got Fin through Intercom for AI support, and we've got our own models internally doing other stuff, and like, okay, so how do you manage these 5 models, so that they have cohesion of the customer experience, so that when you talk to one agent or another, it knows like what you've done with other ones? And how do you centrally manage the context engineering, so as the product changes, as your positioning or where you are in the market, you're not going in individually in all of these tools doing these manual updates? And how do they learn from each other? Like, the really the state we all want to get to over the next little while is like, how do these things recursively get better? And right now, when they're all different, that's very challenging. But so what is, do you have to build one master model or master agent that is going to control them all and choose when to use them and like share information back and forth? Or should we building like one master model internally that then these like sub agents come off of? That is an architecture question that I don't have the answer to, where we're trying to have conversations with smart people about it. And I asked Lemkin about this, and he was like, yeah, that's like an owner problem and like a ramp problem. He's like, but 99% of companies shouldn't even bother thinking about it. Just get like 1 or 3 use cases out the door and then like worry about the rest later. And I thought that was good advice. Like, don't get too slick with it. Just figure out what are the 2 or 3 business problems that I want to solve. Pick a good model from a company that will actually give me a high level of support and I can trust, and like move and just like learn it yourself and make those things work. So it was good feedback, and like I found myself reflecting on it. Do we want to, what problems do we really need to solve right now? Like, and is that a today problem, or is that something like speculative?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that example because, like I mentioned at the top, I'm operating in a vertical SaaS company right now, and they offer an agentic suite, right, for dental and veterinary practices. So it's not go-to-market tooling per se, but you could call it that in that space for them. The original agents were just this agent that did all of these things, right? And it started to bog down because it had to parse through so much data in order to operate, right, on the front end. So they did build that multi-agent architecture, right? Where you've got this master agent that's got all these little agent specialties underneath it. So, the example here is I need to book an appointment, but I need to book an appointment for my kid at your pediatric piece, right? So, okay, well now my master agent points me to the pediatric specialist who does these, right? So that they can just go faster. And that architecture worked, right? So there are examples, especially I think as you get into niched environments where the audiences are specialized, like an owner or an True Logic here, where there's interesting architectures that might make more sense for those audiences.
You just at that point you need somebody who is a super expert.
Yes, yeah, and this is product people, right? Like this is the product, so it's not like we're solving a go-to-market problem here.
Yeah, but on the go-to-market side, you do need somebody who has that level of sophistication, and I think more and more we're going to be hiring product leaders into go to market, or bringing over growth PM people who used to do sort of like self-serve and now have larger mandates, because, the sales-led motion actually does operate more like self-serve today with all these agents. We've dipped our toe in the water with this GTM AI lead, and now we've got a director for applied AI that's basically go to market focused. And so these guys are thinking through it, because I'm like now out of my depth for decision making.
But I think, you talk about the just massive potential value for AI. And I wonder if one of those values isn't, one of the outputs of these agentic AI models just becoming so valuable and really teaching us that companies are fundamentally structured incorrectly. I wonder if that isn't one of the outputs that's a potential there.
I have the same question. Like what does the resourcing need to look like? And Owner is in a funny spot, because we grew up, like our go to market grew up like concurrently with this AI wave. Like I joined Owner June 2022. The ChatGPT moment was November that year. And then I was like taking Replit coding courses in that winter. And just because like I felt out of my depth and I wanted to like learn how this stuff actually worked. And so like AI has been coming to prominence as our team has scaled. And so I'm like learning these lessons on the go, like how we selected startups or how we selected what problems to solve first was like pretty intuitive. I was like, oh, like, I just want to make it easier for my reps not to have to enter information into CRM, like make them more efficient. And then I can get all the data and I can make better decisions because I'll have all the data. So that's why like Momentum was one of our very first implementations. And now in retrospect, like the advice I give to people in this talk I gave a couple times in conference season, I'm like now saying like, okay, there's two things you got to start with before everything else, like first party and third party data. Like get really good third party data of your market and get really good first party data about what's happening in your sales cycles. But like, I just like fell into that realization, or it was like intuitive, but we're going along and now like the agents are getting better and like our team construction has just sort of sprawled. Like we got so much value out of some of these early AI bets, and the VP of BizOps, he was just like a super smart technical guy. And so he was the person building and leading a bunch of this stuff. And so like he's hired a bunch of data science and analysts and now the GTM AI lead and the applied AI director. These are all in his org, but it was like, it wasn't because we were like super thoughtful of like, where should this live and how should we build our organization? It was like, Shank's super smart. He's the most technically savvy and knowledgeable. So like, let's put it there. And now our org design is like the BizOps team is where our AI stuff lives. RevOps is doing a bunch of AI stuff as well, but like the technical, like model building, context engineering, prompt engineering, centralization, like that happens in that team. And we just keep adding people to it, because every time we add people to it, we get all this business value. And so, your question is like, what does the org design look like? That's how we've done it, but we've like really gotten there organically and we're just like growing with the market. But, I look at other companies like Ramp is one that we spend some time with and like to benchmark against. They're sort of similar, but way more aggressive. Like they've got huge teams doing this stuff. But I think like that applied AI team needs to be there if you're trying to do like a really aggressive scale thing. You need that skill set, but the leaders have to be really conversant as well.
Well, Kyle, we appreciate you taking the time. I think we'd be pretty hard pressed to find revenue leaders who have this much depth on the AI front as you do. This is a really insightful conversation. So thank you for taking some time. Tell folks about owner.com, where to find you, anything they should know.
Yeah. Well, Owner is like Shopify for restaurants, and we are growing very aggressively and we're hiring all over the business. So
there we go.
If you're in product and engineering or go to market, if you want to like come to a fun mission, like I know the AI startups are growing like 100x year over year, but like we actually get to help people. We like to say it's like we are AI for the people, like AI to help actual small business owners who are the tapestry of the neighborhoods you live in every day. If that mission is exciting, like check out the careers page. That's the thing that I'd love to highlight to folks. And you hit me up on LinkedIn. I write there, and I've got a Substack and a podcast you can follow. So if this is in your wheelhouse, that's how to get plenty more of it if you want.
Awesome. Love that. Owner.com, hit the careers page. If any of those things sound interesting to you, you can find Kyle. I know his stuff on LinkedIn is phenomenal. The Lemkin pod is what reminded me that I should reach out to you, by the way, to get you on.
Cool.
So I'm glad you made that happen. That was a good get. For folks listening, if you haven't done so, please subscribe to the podcast. Helps us amplify our reach and get more great guests like Kyle on the show. On behalf of John and Justin, and of course, thank you, Kyle. Justin and Sean, sorry. Thank you, Kyle. John. Who the hell's John? Jeez,
Dude, John's an
so
asshole.
good.
He's fired. Sean is hired.
We let John out. Sean, you're in. John's tapped out. Thank you for joining this episode of the Cheat Code and Friends podcast.